Right, well, I'm going to start by asking, what first attracted you to getting involved in Believe?
I'll come clean. My middle son is a football addict, and Man U is his team, so it was a really easy choice.
So it must be great making a movie that because I mean, obviously across your career you've made movies that have appealed
that
to
my children definitely can't look at.
Watch.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It must be great to make a movie that they can really get immersed in.
Completely, and I took them to a screening of it actually, and even my tiny one, who was then 4, just loved it. So I really hope it has that appeal. I mean, I really hope it's one of those sort of, family films that everyone can get something out of. And it was, as you probably know, you've probably read the history of it, it was a struggle to get it made, and there was lots of compromises, and there were lots of sort of days cut and scenes that couldn't be shot, or shots that couldn't be captured. And I think they've done a really good job given all of those circumstances, which everyone else forgets, the viewing public, I don't think, and nor should they, I suppose, but they don't really make special allowances for tiny budget independent films which get limited distribution compared to those huge studio blockbusters that have got endless resources. So I always want to get behind the ones that have struggled in the sort of I don't know, what's the analogy, the incubator for a long time.
But is it from a kind of educational viewpoint, is it quite nice for this film, because I suppose for your middle son, is teaching him and about the history of his the football club that he
Absolutely,
supports. And it continue. I mean, Man United obviously is such a huge team, but this is where, thanks to Matt Busby, he sort of started this sort of success, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, to be honest, I didn't know the story. I mean, a dim, distant sort of memory. I think my dad, because my dad was a big Man U fan. Weirdly, it sort of skipped a generation, and my. So I spent a lot of time in Old Trafford as a child because my dad's a northerner. So that was also just a lovely kind of 6 degrees of separation, kind of coming back to something that I think I've been very resistant to as a kid. And I kind of hated the Saturdays spent in Old Trafford with everyone cheering and beer breath, and I just hated it. And of course it's a very different culture now than it was back then. But
because I was wondering as well, because obviously this is set in only 1984, and I was wondering, is it quite fun for you to do a period piece and go back to a time that you actually knew?
Remember, I know, it's fantastic, yeah. And the miners' strikes and all that sort of thing. But I think it predates 84 a little bit. Oh. Well, trying to think, is that sort of 79, 80?
I'm taking that little bit of information from the trusty source that is IMDb.
Yeah.
Never know what you can believe. Is it because they were dancing to Madness in one moment? So
I know, isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
But remember also, music's often quite sort of retro, isn't it? I mean, my kids danced to things that were sort of, well, actually, what's really weird is they played the Jam and the Clash and all that kind of stuff. They hate music that's on the radio today. They can't bear it because they feel that it's all sort of just rehashed versions of something that was once original and no longer is. So they've got very avant-garde or retro taste in music. But I think that the music, actually, I think is a real coup for this film. He had a lot of, Ben had lots of music contacts, which I think is great, because that's a huge part of the experience of watching a movie, is the supporting story that the music's telling. So yeah.
And of course, you were saying before that you weren't a huge fan of football growing up, but the fact that you've been able to find the kind of the family strand in this movie and the kind of heartwarming story behind it, and having not been a big football fan, do you think that is something that sort of the general public will do?
I do. I don't think you have to be a football fan to enjoy the film. Far from it. In fact, my mum, who can't bear football, I mean, is allergic to it, she absolutely loved the film, really loved it. Yeah, because it's about, obviously, I suppose, realising your dreams and about following your passion and about the conflict of, head or heart. Do you do what you think is the right thing, or do you get pulled by the inexorable sort of passion of the thing that you feel in your body rather than your brain? I think as that mother, the character that I play knows, the football will out. That will always be with him because it's visceral. It's the thing that he's predisposed to doing. The other thing, the education, the grammar school, is something that she's got to work on and sort of hammer into him. But she's still being a good mother by doing that, because she's giving him this other opportunity. It would be, I guess, a lazy mother would say, well, just play your football then. She's trying to give him choices that she doesn't have. So I think there's something that every parent can kind of relate to in that struggle between, do you stay popular with your kid, or do you actually, you know, call them into question and say, do you know, I'm going to be unpopular and make you do something that feels uncomfortable and difficult, but you'll be grateful in the end, of, you know, age-old problems.
And of course, you're working very closely with the young Jack Smith in this movie.
Yeah.
And he's fantastic. And I was wondering,
he's great,
it'd be
isn't
quite
he?
a daunting prospect sometimes when you know you're going to be working so closely with a kid, because I suppose, you know, there's that sort of age-old, the two hardest things to work with in film, and animals and children.
Do you know, I think that comes from, and I think it's true, I don't think that's a myth. I think that notion of it being tricky to work with kids and animals is the idea that you come outside of the job that you're meant to be doing, which is telling your character's story, because naturally, as an adult, and indeed, you know, even more so as a parent, I suppose, you worry about the kid or the animal, and you want to protect them, you want them to be okay, and you don't want them to do anything they don't feel comfortable with, and so you end up sort of, I suppose, not doing your job as well as you possibly could, because you want to get the shot on them to work, because there may only be one chance, you know, in a way that you've got technique and experience. Well, it's like, we'll do mine at the end of the day, and often he wasn't there. I'd act to a cross because we'd have run out of kids. In fact, I think pretty much always we'd run out of kid time. So you patch it together in a way that you're working with another adult, well, the same rules apply for both of you, and it's a game of tennis, it's equal. With a child, there are so many special dispensations that, you know, it's different. But it was a joy to work with him, because also it's his first movie, his first experience of acting, so there's something lovely about watching that grow. And yeah.
So just very quickly before I go, the World Cup's obviously coming up very soon, and when this interview goes up online, it will be after the World Cup, so we'll be able to have the benefit of hindsight. But who do you think is going to win the World Cup? What's your prediction?
I couldn't possibly. I'm not qualified to comment on such things. My oracle is my son, so I can't pretend that they're my own thoughts. All I know is there was bad news this morning about Danny, the injury, something. Maybe that will all be old news. You're looking at me blankly, you know less than me. Yeah.
England got a good chance of winning?
Well, I can't say, can I? I mean, we'll know, as you say, by the time this airs. But of course, be fully supportive.
William, thank you so much for your time.